Welcome back to the Tiny French Bacon for our last edition of Dessert Week, the Showstopper.
Baker, for your showstopper for dessert week, we would like you to make 2 dozen petit fours. 12 must be cake based, 12 must be cookie based. There are no hard requirements except that they must be bite-sized, so use your imagination and come up with something delicious. On your mark, get set, bake!
Petit fours are those little bite-sized pieces that are passed around at fancy parties. I have never made petit fours per se before, and for my two choices, the biscuit base, I decided to make a sandwich cookie, and for the sponge cake, I decided to make a mini sandwich. The mini sandwich sponge is made out of dacquoise. Dacquoise is a sponge cake that's made with almond powder, and it's usually a little sweeter. It's often at the base of entremet. It is a sponge that's made whipping egg whites to a foamy, very solid. You can put it over your head, and then you sift delicately the almond powder and a little bit of flour and powdered sugar into it. If you are very skilled, you can even make dacquoise fully gluten-free with adding no flour at all. It's a little harder to incorporate and has a little less structure, but I think it'd be better. I had about 20 grams of flour into mine, and just to make sure it'd be sturdy enough. And it goes into the oven for about 20 minutes, but the oven is cracked open. So that's what I started with because it needs to cool down the most. And now let's start to the MOCHA sandwich cookie. The dough of my cookies is a pretty standard spritz cookie, and this is why you should not wear black while baking. Bakers are usually wearing white, and it's because it's very messy. Spritz cookie is a standard, kind of like fattier than a shortbread, and half of the dough will have cocoa and half of the dough will just have flour. So we'll have a nice contrast between a cocoa-y cookie and a vanilla flavored cookie. It is a showstopper, so I wanted to push the envelope a little bit with two dough. You can see Franz in the background thinking I'm making whipped cream. Sorry Franz, still not today. The dough is very soft, and that's so it can be used for the spritz cookie. I had forgotten one major element tasting the dough. I had forgotten to add salt. Very important when you're doing anything with chocolate, I think especially. The salt adds a nice balance of flavor and actually makes everything taste a little more chocolatey. Checking on my dacquoise just in time before spritzing the cookie, and it's ready. So for the spritz cookie, spritz means dropped cookie. I have a nice cookie gun that my sister-in-law Wendy gifted me for Christmas, and I was really excited to use it. Especially for petit fours that have to be fancy and regular in shape, I thought that would be the best choice to have cookies all the same size. You have to pack the dough really firmly, but it's really great because if some of the cookies are misshapen, you can just scrape them away and put them back in the dough. The dough is very forgiving, and there we go, simple. And for the black cookie, pretty much wash, rinse and repeat. Same idea. It made me feel very powerful. I am a cookie machine! I'd like to mention that showstoppers are very long and intricate, and I was tired, so you might see some breakdowns happening. Time for the almond butter and jelly cookie. I am allergic to peanuts, so I make mine with almond. And instead of standard almond butter, I decided to go with a praliné, which is pretty much a caramel nut butter. So mine is 50% hazelnut, 50% almonds, and a very liquid runny caramel that enrobes the nut. It takes 20 to 30 minutes, so stay close to your pot. but it is fairly time consuming. So in the meantime, I'm doing my coffee buttercream that's gonna be sandwiched in between my two spritz cookies. Buttercream is pretty standard. It's powdered sugar, very soft room temperature butter, and whatever flavoring you want, in my case, espresso powder. Here is our praline. So it is extremely sticky. It's pretty much just nuts covered in caramel. Let that cool while I finish dealing with my buttercream. And the sandwiching operation is pretty simple. Take your prettiest cookies, swirl some buttercream in between, and take some of your nicest and most even shaped cocoa cookie and squeeze it on top. I love those cookies, they get better with time. For the praline, you just blitz your nuts in your food processor and it's extremely noisy. But don't worry, it's supposed to be like this. It takes a while to completely combine into a paste once the oils of the nut have been extracted a little bit. And there you go, praline. It goes perfectly with yogurt, ice cream, spread on toast. It's an all-purpose deliciousness. I'm doing my royal icing for the sandwich using some egg whites, powdered sugar that I'm mixing in the background for at least 7 minutes. Trimming the edges of my dacquoise. So there's two methods you can make sandwich sponges. You can make little by little individual ones, or you can make a large one that you slice after. This jelly is grape jelly that's been homemade a little in advance because it takes about a week to completely firm up. Here's our praline that I'm spreading evenly. I'm blobbing both on top of each other and then delicately slicing. So I've seen sushi chefs use plastic wrap to cover before they slice their roll. That's why I use the parchment paper for me to cut cleanly, and this is my biggest mistake of all of this recipe. It is icing those little sandwiches. They're perfectly fine like they are. I decided to ice to make them prettier, but the icing was still a little too runny, and this is the mess that happened.
It's shit! It looks like shit! The icing was bad.
Not only does it look bad, but it ended up also tasting bad. This is just a little bit of ganache, so equal part cream and chocolate, to pipe into my little spritz cookie to make them look like flowers. Gilding the lily pretty much, trying to salvage the pretty cookies I had, and trying to hopefully have the icing set on the sandwich in the meantime. Guess what? It didn't fully set. I couldn't prepare for the Showstopper too much.
3, 2, 1. Bakers are done.
We're gonna look at those guys and not at the white turds.
Indeed, it's a 50-50 split. I was really proud of the biscuits, petit four, and very ashamed of that messy sponge ones. For judging today, pandemic obliged, we have our neighbor, since we can't really go out and ask people to come over to judge. This is Naman, he's back, and he's gonna try both my petit four and give them a grade independently, and then I'll combine to make my average. He's trying the spritz cookie and he loves it. They are one of my favorite creations. They taste like vanilla, cocoa, and chocolatey, a perfect mocha mix. And they kept that very strong snap. So when you bit into it, you had like a very satisfying crunch before you hit that buttercream. Trying now the fail almond butter and jelly sandwich. And I had to give poor Naman a plate and a fork, which to me is the best indicator that there are failed petit fours. Petit fours are supposed to be eaten at parties with your fingers. You are not supposed to need a fork, a plate, a napkin. The fact that you cannot pick them up and just have at it, have a bite, means that they are not fitting the requirement of a petit four. And on top of that, they didn't taste great. The icing made everything way too sweet, and it was still sticky. So honestly, it was a bad idea to ice them, but the sponge itself was also not perfect. It's back to the drawing board for that recipe. I am fairly upset at this because after 4 hours of baking, having achieved so little is a little disappointing, but that's what happens when you challenge yourself. After discussing the requirements, Naman gave me the scores of 9 out of 10 for the mocha sandwich cookie, nearly perfect score, and a 3 out of 10 for the almond butter sandwich. Everything averaging out to 6 out of 10, I think a well-deserved mediocre grade.
I've been playing for like 5 hours and I've got through 2 levels.
You've got like 6 to play out of the baking. It's big.
And you played the baking show for 3 hours.
No.
So thanks for watching, considering those circumstances that it was a failed bake, but trying to look on the upside because next week is Pie Week! Here is a little bonus for all of those who stayed and watched. Here is more fonts. Bye!
Who's your happy puppy? Who's your happy puppy? You about to be double happy? Oh, yes. Look at you. Oh, yes. Here's your bone. Here's your bone.
Puppy butt.